Kia ora. I'm Pete Gillespie from Garage Project in Wellington, New Zealand, and this is the Brewer to Brewer podcast from All About Beer. Now, my guest today is the inimitable Scotty Hargrave from the mighty Bolter Brewing Company in Australia. He's here for a conversation that goes beyond the brew house and into topics that matter to brewing professionals and curious beer drinkers. Visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media. And to support journalism in the beer space, check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Make a little donation. They don't need much. Price of a delicious IPA. You'd buy these guys a drink, wouldn't you? Do it now. Right, we will kick on to this interview in just a moment. But first, this message.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. They've been working with brewers on a wide range of ingredients and delicious beers. First Tea combines the flexibility of order sizes with the experience you need to create innovative and successful tea beers. They get you the most direct from farm tea selection, so you are working with flavorful and consistent products. You can find more about First Tea's collaborations with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting blog.firsttea.com. That's blog.firsttea.com.
All right. So, welcome, Scotty. Now, I've known Scotty for a number of years. We've brewed beers together. He's a wonderful brewer and an absolutely delightful human being, and it is an immense pleasure to be able to chat to him today. Now, I always find it incredibly interesting to find out what brought people to brewing, Scotty. So tell us, what is your story? How did you get started?
Well, first off, thanks, Pete, for having me. And thank you, John, in the background. Hey, everyone out there. What brought me to brewing was, I guess, curiosity. Played a big part for me back around the turn of the millennium, if anyone can remember that. That was a pandemic and about 4 zombie apocalypses ago. I started to get interested in, I don't know, I guess I started to go looking at the periphery of beer, as it sort of stood in Australia at around, the year 2000 or so. And there was just the very beginnings, the green shoots, I suppose, of an Australian craft beer industry. What is now a very big brewery called Little Creatures was just sort of firing off their pale ale, which was back then still called Little Creatures Live. I think Chuck Hahn might have just been getting the James Squire beers going in Sydney, and a couple of the bigger sort of retailers opened sort of mega stores, if you like, where I lived in Canberra, here in Oz, and I just started to notice these beers with different labels sort of showing up, and I sort of got interested in that. I was playing in bands, and I was, a concreter, so I was drinking lots of a beer called Melbourne Bitter in tinnies.
Oh, which if you, a lot of our listeners will be in the United States, and they should realize that Melbourne Bitter is one of the greatest beverages in the entire world, isn't it?
It is. It's in the same family tree as Foster's Lager.
I have to say I've drunk quite a lot of it in my time as well. It can be very refreshing.
It can. It's good for it has its place like most beers do. And I just started to see a bunch of different beers, and I began to sort of dabble, I guess, and then at basically the same time I started to take notice of all these German beers that were suddenly available, German Pilsners and Hefeweizens and Dunkelweizens, and then that sort of spilled over into beers, Belgian beers like Hoegaarden and Leffe and all these sorts of things. And it was just that green door that you need the secret knock to and the special handshake that I knew nothing about. But once you realize the door's there, you want to go in and have a bit of a peek.
Yeah.
So on the other side. And then I realized, oh, okay, this is where this is where the real beer really is. And sort of stepped
Were you-
through the door.
Were you homebrewing, Scotty?
No, not by that. Well, around a couple of years before that, my wife and I had bought our first house, and did what everybody does when they first get a mortgage, which is panic, shit themselves, decide they're only going to be able to eat baked beans and have to make homebrew because you won't be able to afford anything else. So I had a few goes on the Cooper's kits, the sort of cake mix versions, I suppose, of brewing. And they were clean, if uninspiring. I mean, I was probably going down the wrong track. They probably tasted more like the beer I would eventually end up drinking than the massive mainstream lagers I thought I was trying to make. I was just trying to make something recognizable as beer. So gave up on that, went back to drinking better, just went back to drinking beer, and then eventually sort of stumbled into, the sort of formative Australian craft beers and all these great European imports. And I just spent the next few years annoying all the people I knew, trying to get them to drink similar sort of beers. And, for me, it was that discovery, that real voyage of discovery. And I was sort of wanting to share it with people. They're like, hey, did you know, like, there's a whole nother thing that's also beer, and it's not, it's not the shit that bloody sponsors the cricket and the football and all this sort of stuff. It's,
Do you remember the pivotal brew, the actual bottle of beer that changed your mind, that opened your third eye to the world of beer? What was it?
So it was Erdinger Dunkelweizen. And one Christmas there, before I was a brewer, I bought myself a gift box of these Erdinger 500ml bottles at one of the big retailers. And there was a couple of Heffies and a couple of Crystal Weizens. There might have been the Oktoberfest sort of wheat beer they do every year in there as well. But there was also this evil black bastard sitting in that box. And I was really, I was actually quite intimidated by it. So it sat in the back of the fridge, like for, a few weeks while I'd sort of guzzled all these other ones. And I came home from a hard day of concreting one Friday afternoon, I think. And, Mother Hubbard's opened the cupboard, and that's all that was there. So I just sort of took a deep breath and cracked this beer open. And then suddenly it was like another door inside the door to the back room opened up. And I was like, holy cow. I was like, how can a beer that looks so dark and evil be so soft and beautiful and lovely and inviting? And that did my head in. That sort of was the beer that made me go, there's something really special to beer. It's not just, something that you sort of to fuel you goofing off for the weekend or whatever. Yeah. It's something much bigger and much more complex and much more a part of human history than that. It really was quite profound for me, I suppose. So
it's interesting. I think Evan and I chatted briefly about this last week. The fact that there's this sort of, there's that Japanese word otaku, which is sometimes negative, but it also means something that is far more than a hobby. It's an obsession. And beer's really got that, doesn't it? Like, people will just do anything. It can change somebody's life, often, hopefully, for the best. Yeah.
Well, we would all probably, you and I certainly would agree with that. I know my family certainly would, for sure. I mean, once the great mistress that is beer got her sort of claws into me, that was sort of it. It became, like I said, several years of just searching, and that's how stupid I am. It never dawned on me to actually become a brewer or learn too much. I was learning more about different beers that I liked and didn't like and beer styles, but I never really got behind the nuts and bolts of beer. How do you make it? What puts it together? What is the difference between an ale and a lager? Like, I don't know. I just didn't bother with that for a while. And then eventually I was working, I was doing some concrete for some family a couple of hours away from Canberra one summer. And I had an auntie of mine who's, obviously she not lost patience, but I think she was speaking for all the relatives when she said, gee, you seem pretty obsessed about this beer thing. Why don't you do something about that, Scotty? You know, which was her way of like, can you just shut up? Like, we've all heard about your craft beer and your snazzy European beers. Now just shut up for a while. So I went back to Canberra and basically enrolled in an adult education course, which was on the history of beer, which was at the much loved and now gone and much fabled Wigan Pen brew pub in the middle of Canberra. And a guy called Lockie McComish, who owned the place, he did this half-day history of beer adult education course. So after about a 20-minute tirade about excise, he sort of got into it, and he sort of explained the history of it, you know, going back several thousand years and all these sort of bits and pieces. And then he just went and got a few handfuls of malt and put them in a lunchbox esky or cooler, I guess our US friends would call it. Boiled the jug, put some hot water in, and just replicated a very simple mash. And as soon as I sort of smelt those aromas, that cereal, biscuity, you know, all of that aroma just grabbed me by the nuts, actually, Pete. And I was just dumbfounded because apart from mixing a few Cooper's gooey kits, I'd had absolutely nothing to do with brewing, but all those aromas were just so familiar, very, very primal. Like it was doing something to my brain chemistry, and I was just flabbergasted, you know. And but somehow it seemed really familiar, and I to this day I don't know what that is, unless that's runs through every, you know, most human beings, that maybe it's a, you know, beer's a core food group. that's why I kind of recognize.
It's incredibly comforting, isn't it? It's an incredibly comforting smell, isn't it? It's like, it does. I know exactly what you mean, Scotty. It does something really quite special. So from there, where did you go? And I mean, look, maybe you could explain to obviously American listeners what chart your entry into the brewing world alongside what's been happening to beer and craft beer in Australia.
Yeah, well, I guess from that initial, you know, that half-day course that I was just talking about, the guy running the course, Lockie, said, "Hey, you should go and see these guys," because I had said to him, "Is there a way that you can get into brewing, you know, for a living without having to have a, you know, a chemical engineering degree or a food science degree?" I was just a dumb concreter, so I didn't really understand how that all worked. And he said, "Yeah, you can if you're good enough and you've got enough passion and blah, blah, blah." And he said, "But you should go and see these guys." And there was a poster of the Canberra Brewers up on the wall, which is a home brew club in Canberra. So my wife badgered me to go to the next meeting of the Canberra Brewers. That was a couple of weeks past then. And off I went, met some folks, made a couple of kit beers, almost like a Hogarden sort of knockoff, I suppose. And, you know, it was one of the most nerve-wracking nights of my life, I think, was taking that beer in and letting other people try it. So that freaked me out, but they were all surprised that it was actually a kit beer. They thought it was better than that. And that little bit of encouragement sort of spurred me on. And a lot of these guys had hand-me-down brew kits, you know, so you'd be able to like, "Hey, Scotty, yeah, you know that dude over there? He's got one of those, you know, he's got a Gatorade mash tun. You should hit him up. See, I know he's not using it anymore. And he's also got an old wash copper that you could use as a kettle, and it's hiding under his house," because I saw it last week. And, you know, so I was able to cobble all the gear together and started brewing at home. And very, you know, pretty quickly after that, I started to got the confidence up to actually put a couple of beers in competitions, and they started to do really well. And, you know, the better the beers went, the more confidence I had, the more I was searching and trying new things and whatnot. And the end result was about 23 months, just under 2 years after I'd started homebrewing, I ended up being asked to be the head brewer at the Sunshine Coast Brewery, which is on the east coast of Australia. It's about 2 hours north of Brisbane. And that was in August 2008. And back then, I think the Australian beer industry full stop, including all the big guys, I think totaled about 135 breweries or something like that. So, it was, I guess, Australian, you'd had, the Little Creatures and James Squire and Matilda Bay, and they'd sort of all had short, sharp rises and then sort of basically went backwards. And, so we had a blip of craft beer sort of the very end of the 90s, early 2000s, and sort of went quiet for a bunch of years. And just as I got back into it, there were a few more sort of starting. And so I went to the Sunshine Coast Brewery, was there for exactly a year before I moved on to a little brewery, and it was a very little brewery then, called Stone and Wood, which was back in my home state of New South Wales, because we'd moved north about 1,000 miles, lock, stock and barrel, wife and 2 kids, to go up to the Sunshine Coast. Very, very beautiful part of the world. And then I got the opportunity to go into Stone and Wood as their first full-time sort of production employee. And we ended up making a little beer called Stone and Wood Pacific Ale, which sort of, stormed the barricades here in Australia as one of the, the really early signs that craft beer was taking off and possibly had a future. There are a bunch of other guys that are around before that for a long time. Yeah.
But that was the pivotal beer, wasn't it? It was the beer that jumped the chasm, didn't it? It wasn't just a beer for the pointy end of craft brewers. It was a beer that I think captured a lot of people's imagination.
Yeah, absolutely. And it had, it was 4.4% alcohol. It was reasonably hazy, certainly unfiltered, and it was really basically for the domestic market around here, around the sort of, the Byron Bay region, really. And the main beer was going to be our sort of, Helly's style lager that was in green bottles and, very European looking. But it was Pacific Ale, and that at the time it was called draft ale when I first started making it. So, and people probably called it drought ale at times. We still have trouble with that word draft here in Australia. I mean, you have too many droughts, so people just flip. But the big thing about that beer, I suppose, well, there's a couple of things, is it really heralded a new era in what craft beer could be, and that there were promising signs, and a lot of people were taking to this little beer. But I guess one of the biggest and most obvious things that it's known for is its introduction to the world, in a lot of cases, of a little Aussie hop called Galaxy.
And look, we'll chat about Galaxy later, I think.
Yep, sure.
That'd be excellent. Scotty, you should keep going, because we haven't even got to Bolter yet.
Right. Okay, yeah. So got in there, did that for 4 years. Then I went to another brewery that was also in Byron. I was very lucky to have, jobs at the only 2 breweries in a town of 5,000 people. So that was cool. Did that for 18 months, and then got asked to see if I'd be involved in a brewery that was potentially going to start up on the Gold Coast, which is just over the border in Queensland, about an hour south of 3/4 an hour north of Byron Bay, and about an hour south of Brisbane. And that was with half a dozen guys, including some very famous surfers. And I got asked, would I like to be involved? So I went and had a look and met the guys. There wasn't much to look at, actually. We had a shed that they'd asked, could I build my dream brewery in there? And I thought, yeah, I probably could. And they said, well, that's good, because we've already taken out a 5-year lease. So we're kind of stuck with that building. But it was, it's a great building to start with. So a big thing for me that it wasn't going to be some sort of celebrity-driven, buy and flip sort of situation. And it turned out it wasn't. The guys were very, very sincere in that they wanted to be part of a brewery, and were very honest in the fact that they had absolutely no idea how to go about it. So they sort of assembled Ant McDonald, our CEO, and Sterling Howland, our brand director, and myself, and another guy called Aaron Waters. And as I was basically tasked with getting the building right and all that sort of stuff, and I put all the gear together and I knew the beers I wanted to make on this thing, and I just wanted to make sure that when we kicked off with something that wasn't just another stand in the back of the queue American style pale ale or blonde ale, or I just wanted our thing to be a little bit different. And luckily I already had a little beer that I'd pretty much developed at home in my garage. It was ready to go and looking for a home, and that was our XPA, our flagship. So
which is one of the most smashable, delicious beers that I've ever had. It's quite remarkable. It's an awesome beer. If any of the listeners have never been to Australia, they should definitely go and have a little bit of that.
Yeah, so thank you. That's very, very kind of you. And we were pretty confident that we would go okay. I mean, you never know. I thought building a 35 or I guess the guys would call it a 30 barrel brew house. Straight off the bat is a pretty audacious sort of way to start things. And, I basically thought I was building an oil tanker really for a unknown, brewery that had never made a beer. I had a bunch of other brewers in the industry here in Oz who were, once they'd heard about us, were offering me sort of brewery space. Oh, do you want to brew your first batches here? And, you can come and use some tanks of ours and all this sort of stuff. And I was adamant that no, right from the start, every drop had to come out of that brewery that I was still yet to put together. So sort of held off. And then March, I said yes to Bolter in March 9th, 2015, and March 8th, 2016, we rolled the first kegs out of the brewery. So I don't know what planning is like in over there, Pete, but like to be able to say, from scratch in 364 days, have a brewery built and beers out the door was pretty good.
That's
going.
pretty impressive. Yeah, especially in Australia, I would say.
Yeah, because every council has different planning rules and all these sorts of legislative and administrative bits and pieces that have to work together. So when the dust is settled, we may look back and see that as actually one of the most amazing things of all that happened, that we could get going that quick. Because as you know, you burn through the cash pretty quick, especially if you haven't started making beer yet. So
absolutely. So that was 2016 that you were. So fast forward now, where is Bolter at now?
We are basically full, which is a good place to be. I put together the 30 barrel 4-vessel DME kit. In 2018, I put in another kettle. In 2019, I put in another lauter ton, which helped us sort of fill the gaps. By that stage, we'd already ordered a Crohn's combi cube, a 60 hect combi cube. And of course, when sort of February and March 2020 happened to the entire world, we had the Crohn's guys telling us that our September 2020 commissioning date for this brew house probably wasn't going to happen because the borders all over the world were closing. The Crohn's, European-based Crohn's guys were all being recalled back to Germany and back to their families, which is quite understandable. And the initial conversations were, this is going to be interesting. We don't know how we can get the commissioning engineers and these guys out to you. And your September sort of, first production dates or whatever look pretty unlikely. And from our side, it was like, too bad. We have to make this happen. So we ended up assembling a small team. Myself and a couple of other guys that we had here in Australia, guys who work for Bolter now and contract to Bolter. And we had a couple of the Crohn's guys, commissioning engineers, software engineers, and commissioning brewmaster all dialing in every night across sort of July and August in 2020. And we became the first piece of Crohn's equipment remotely commissioned anywhere in the world. So
that's awesome.
that was pretty crazy. So, so we got that guy in, and we our tanks over time had sort of moved up from, I'm going to try and do this in American terms, from we've got 34 60-barrel tanks, we've got 13 240-barrel tanks, and we've got 13 400 and something barrel tanks. So we're basically full, mate. We're pretty well chockers at the moment. So I think we just cracked for 2022 140,000 barrels. So
Wow.
when I tell that to our American friends that's happened inside sort of six and a half years, they sort of laugh at me mostly, and then they realise that I mean it. So yeah, so it's been a wild ride, Pete, which I'm sure you know all about.
Yeah,
it's
very impressive, Scotty. So we're actually going to take a short break now for this message, and then come right back for more of this conversation with Scotty Hargrave from Bolter Brewing.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. They've been working with brewers on a wide range of ingredients and delicious beers. First Tea combines the flexibility of order sizes with the experience you need to create innovative and successful tea beers. They get you the most direct from farm tea selection, so you are working with flavorful and consistent products. You can find more about First Tea's collaborations with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting blog.firsttea.com. That's blog.firsttea.com.
Welcome back. I'm Pete Gillespie from Garage Project, chatting to Scotty from Bolter Brewing in Australia. So we've had the background of Scotty's journey into the wonderful world of brewing, and of course the rise of the mighty Bolter, which must be one of the biggest craft brewers in Australia now. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we are. Yeah,
you must be.
We'd be up there. I actually had when I was over in Hop Harvest last year, I think when I mentioned to different folks are asking, like, how much beer do you guys make? And when I told them, I got told 3 or 4 times that we might be in the sort of top 20, 25 in the US as well.
Wow.
Which
you've made it. You've made it, Scotty.
I don't know if that's actually true, but it's pretty mind-blowing if it is.
It would be indeed.
Yeah. I don't know. I just don't really think about that too much, because it'd just make me melt down, I think.
It would make you nervous, wouldn't it? And then you wouldn't know what to do next. Now, look, Scotty, you're one of the most passionate brewers that I know. And I want to know what, as brewers, I think I go through little phases. Different things excite me. I get fixated with certain things, and I'm very interested to know what excites you at the moment. What really makes your beer go all frizzly? What's the excitement for you in brewing,
mate? I think it's really, at the moment, it's like it's promising that there might actually be this long heralded, I should say, return of the glory of lager beers and pilsner beers and these sorts of things. So, I mean, it's great to see, even here in Australia, there's a few breweries that are really making their mark with great lagers, not just, fuck off huge IPAs or something like that, that it's good to see that there is people starting to really understand, nuance and integration and that glorious simplicity of something that's just really, really well made, and where those intrinsic, albeit only a few ingredients, just really sing together. I mean, that's what I think in a lot of ways got me into beer in the first place, is when it started to take my breath away, that you could go, how can this be so good? And I can't even tell why it's so good. It's pushing so many buttons, and I don't even know where these buttons are, but it's pushing them. And, and that's for me, in a lot of ways, is the real magic of beer. And I'm certainly seeing, over the last few years, an awful lot of great lagers coming out of the US, obviously. We've both got a bunch of friends over there that are making, sensational lagers. And, there's that. I guess in the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, I've been really playing around with trying to get dry hopping right in pilsners in
So
particular.
talk to us about that. Obviously, a lot of our audience here they're reasonably technical. What is the secret, if you wish to share, about dry hopping in a pilsner?
I really think for me, I can only, talk about what I'm trying to control in myself, is that idea of like not overdoing it, of having soft hands, of getting all that, if you're going to go the trouble of dry hopping, then you want a return from that, obviously. But at the same time, you want to be true to your original intention. So that's always the hardest thing to me. Like, I'm quite often, particularly when I first started doing it, was I'd have buckets and buckets of hops, and then I'd go to tip them all in, and I'd find a way to struggle against myself to put that last bucket in, and to learn that restraint would actually make a much better beer. And that's
less is more. Less is more,
Absolutely.
isn't it? With these, and I mean, it's hard after years and years of us pushing the grams per liter of dry hop to its absolute maximum. It's basically to the point where like there's just solid in the tank, and you have to squeeze out a tiny drip of super hopped IPA at the end. It takes quite a lot to go back to restraint. I found the same thing. I've interestingly as well, like hot side as well with lagers being restrained with things, because sometimes you put almost an amount that's so tiny you'd think it wouldn't actually really deliver very much, but you get an awful lot out of it when there's space to actually taste it and recognize it. It gives it room, doesn't it?
Absolutely. One of my favorite records, this is going to sound a bit weird, is Regatta de Blanc by The Police. And that's such a good record because the songs are really good, because all the players, all the inputs, all the ingredients are really good, but everybody's got room. They interweave and mesh into each other, but nothing is colliding with anything else. Nothing's talking over anything else. It's not a big muddied mess. And I think that's exactly what, hot side lagers are all about as well. I mean, I think those, for me, it's about first wort hopping and 10, 15 minute additions before flame out. That late kettle addition, I think, is super important from a sort of a palate weight and a mouthfeel thing, and not necessarily that it's going to be like blow your mind from hop aroma or character, but there's something that just satiates the palate when you make those additions. And as beers like that are, like all beer, is about balance, and getting those hot side additions right, as well as the dry hop, the timing, the amounts and the varieties right. I mean, because what's really intriguing me about this is to be able to produce a beer that's recognizably a good, clean, crisp pilsner, but that all those extra hop characters, because you've decided to go down that track, that there's enough definition and integration in that as well. What you want it to count if you're going to go to the trouble of potentially wrecking a beer. You want it to count. And when I'm really happy with some of the ones I've got at the moment. I actually brought one home from work yesterday that I'm looking at, is probably like a West Coast, pills. And I know, like, I'm looking at obviously guys like Highland Park and Evan at Green Cheek and there's lots of guys, particularly on the West Coast, that are really doing that and doing it well these days. And another thing that really intrigues me about this dry hop pills thing is it's almost like you've got IPA coming one way and pills coming in the other, and maybe at the end of all this they'll all just meet together as this thing called hoppy beer.
Absolutely. I've always been quite a fan of ignoring stylistic names and just doing whatever tastes really great. And that I mean, you and I have talked about this. I think we were both of us in our last trip over to the States for the hop harvest. I mean, for me, that was absolutely the standout. Especially those LA brewers, such drinkable beers with so much flavor. You mentioned timing, Scotty, for your dry hops. I mean,
Mhm.
do you have any little pearls of wisdom you'd share with people around when you would dry hop? Because it's,
Yeah, well,
that's
yeah.
hot
My
topic.
thing is, my thing is probably depends a bit on your yeast strain and fermentation performance and personal preference. But for me, I like to start out, reasonably cool, sort of 10C or so, and slowly step up the fermentation over about 12, 14 days. And
Mm.
I'll usually get, sorry for the folks out there, I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit, but I usually get them up to about 17C. So where
Mhm.
they're doing diacetyl rest. And then I'll usually dry hop after they've been at 17 for, 4 or 5 days, and give them another 4 or 5 days, and then slowly step them back down.
Yep.
Let lager yeast do what they're meant to do, which is,
Mm.
for me, it sort of goes slowly up the mountain and slowly back
And
down.
slowly down the other side.
Yeah,
That is beautiful and poetic, Scotty. You're an excellent brewer and a poet. Maybe we should talk hops. Let's talk hops,
Sure.
shall we? What excites you most in the world of hops, Scotty?
You know what? There is so much going on all over the place. It's hard to sort of keep track of it all. New Zealand hops are very, very exciting, Pete.
They are,
All those nuggets you guys have over there. So, yeah, I'm waiting to see that, that one day there will be, enough for a waka to go around. All those sorts of things, as I'm sure.
I think Evan and I ended up chatting a little bit about Riwaka. It's obviously a problematic hop at times. How do you deal with it best? When you can get hold of it,
I can get hold of it, I treat it as, I'm very, very protective of it. I think more than anything, it's gratitude that I've actually got some to play with. So I don't chuck it around the place willy-nilly, if you like. I think it's at times can be, can be challenging, for sure. And it's a bit like herding the cats, but when you get it right, and you can, particularly, I like to blend. I'm a serial blender, probably like most folks. I'll generally, I'll probably blend that. And I've found with Rawaka, it's one of those funny ones where sometimes the less of it you use, the more impact it can have.
Absolutely.
Which is confounding because I'm pretty simple. But I think that's a real thing. I'm seeing a lot of that lately where I go, oh, right, I've still got 10 bags of this left. I'm going to throw 8 of them in this beer. And I'll be like, well, hang on, well, why not? I'll put 2 in. I'll consider what else I'm going to put in and around it. There might be something else that's carrying the heavy, a heavier load, but I'll have some of this in there. I think I do use a lot of it in dry hop and a little bit really, again, late kettle. With Rawaka, I think it goes really well with, obviously, some of the big guys, the Citras and the Mosaics, and just got to be careful a little bit. And I don't just go, well, I'll cut it into thirds and put a third of that, a third of that, a third of that. It's quite often more convoluted than that.
I'd agree with you, Scotty. Less is definitely more with Rawaka. It's an interesting one. I do believe that we should be able to be getting more soon. I think one of the big problems with it was that it I remember when it first came out, it's probably well over 10 years ago, and it was the most mind-blowing hop I think I'd come across. I was just like, whoa, this is incredible. Tropical, lime, amazing. And then just over the years, it just whenever I got my hands on it, it seemed to not deliver quite the same thing that I remembered. And I wonder if it was just where it was being grown, who was growing it, picking windows, all of those important, interesting things. But now I feel like there's a obviously a new wave of hop growers in New Zealand who probably, I feel, really are paying a lot of attention to how they do things, and it should be a lot better. It's also a bastard of a hop to grow. Farmers hate it. Do you know this, Scotty? I'm about to head down to the hop fields later this week, and you'll drive around and all of the hops will be up the top of the wires, spreading across the strings. and Riwaka will be halfway up. It really is the most stunted, slow, sad-looking thing, and farmers hate that because they don't want the other farmers to drive past their field and see these shitty hops. They want something that looks spectacular. Yeah,
hide it in the middle.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what you're saying though. Like that is a symptom sometimes, like, because you've got me spouting, go, geez, I wish there was more Riwaka. And then depending, with a variety like that, it's really, really hard when you get the extra acreage and you still might have a really small picking window and, all these other things and different, different growers, different locations, all sorts of things that when hops become victims of their own success.
Yeah.
And that's always tough, and that's always a bit of a thing. I know, it seems like there's often that sort of similar thing with Amarillo, the way it exploded out, and then it became really, really hard to be able to nail it every time because the amount required was so huge and the picking window is, still relatively small
and very difficult to find anything that recreates what I remember from the early Amarillo. Hey, look, this is an excellent segue onto something that we need to talk about. You're Australian. I hold you personally responsible for Galaxy. What? Tell us about Galaxy.
Galaxy. Yeah. I guess the little Aussie hop that could, in a lot of ways. It definitely transformed things down here. I think it made a lot of folks, overseas really sort of sit up and take notice of, the Australian beer industry, but particularly like hop industry here in Australia. And it's done a lot of things for, I can't deny it was a huge part of my my history, I suppose, particularly when I was at Stone and Wood. So it's another one where, like they keep expanding, and then as they expand, then the orders for it, just the demand for it grows at the same time. So I don't know if they're ever ever really making that much ground on it. So, and it's grown in two sort of distinct areas as well. So, there's always, there's been a Victorian Galaxy and a Tasmanian Galaxy, so, and, I think the vast majority of it is basically, they're all group lots anyway. So it's ultimately homogenized, but, it's just, I guess, the success story of Australian.
It's pretty variable, isn't it? I mean, this is what I struggle with sometimes, is that, I can pull off something that tastes great sometimes and other times not. I'll tell you what, I was hanging out with an American brewer recently, and they said something which I wish they hadn't said because I can't get it out of my head. And they were like, oh, Galaxy, it's okay, but I really struggle with that peanut character. And I was like, peanut character? And now every time I do a Galaxy beer, I fucking smell peanuts.
Peanuts.
Yeah.
Wow. I wonder what
not
sort
penis, peanuts. Peanuts.
I wonder what sort of compound that might be. I do
Isn't
know, like,
interesting.
I mean, at one point in time, I was probably throwing more Galaxy in more tanks than anyone else on the planet. So when we got Bolter going and I had the chance to do that, I sort of stepped right back from Galaxy. I just, I had all these other sort of snazzy American hops that I really wanted to integrate into beers and explore a lot more, because, I felt like I'd done, a lot of Galaxy in my time, and it does, like, over as you get through the season, it definitely picks up sort of catty sort of aromas if you're not looking after it, But I mean, again, that's probably another victim of its own success sort of piece, where if they've got to keep expanding, and if they've got to do that in a place that's reasonably close to the processing, I suppose, and that's where the limitations, you're probably going to have great lots and shitty lots just because of that, because it's like, well, yeah, that's within half an hour's drive of the, of the kilns and the the picking machines and stuff. So that's where we'll have to put it, which may not mean you get the best hops. I mean, we've had some sort of couple of shitty seasons, like weather-wise, down here as well. So they've sort of played a part, I would suggest. But yeah, it's It is definitely variable, and I'm guessing that's why their strategy is to to sort of homogenize it as much as possible.
Yeah.
To try and minimize that. I mean, the risk is then you bring everything to the middle rather than you might have some shitty stuff.
And as brewers, we all want to get our hands on something that gives us the edge and is a little bit better than what everyone else has, don't we? Can you offer anyone any advice on the best way to use Galaxy?
Yeah, for mine, I would say be very, very careful if you're going to use it hot side. I think it's really your best keeping your powder dry till you dry hop it. Relatively short contact time. It's another hop that you can make really explosive beers using just Galaxy on its own. But also, like it's if you pick the right ones, Citra is a pretty obvious one to blend it with. Some of the other lesser known Aussie sisters are also really good to use. I mean, I'm guessing most folks might have heard of Victoria's Secret, but Galaxy and Enigma can go well. Galaxy and Topaz can go really well. And the biggest thing I think is coming back to that soft hands approach, because they're such big, boisterous colonial hops, that they've got a lot of grunt, they've got a lot of mongrel, they've got an awesome potential as far as sort of fruit character and all that goes. But along with that, and massively high oils at times, that along with that, you've got to be able to manage the not so positive characteristics, but that you get in any hops. But it's almost like it's highlighted in Galaxy. It's got all this great, fantastic tropical fruit and peach and citrus character, and then on the other side, you've also got, if you're not careful, you've got the caddy and overly sort of burnt resiny character if you're not really careful about how you use it. When I was at Stone and Wood, that was my boss's beer, Brad Rogers. That was his beer. He designed all that. But I would have home brewers, other pro brewers, all sorts of people hitting me up wanting to know how Pacific Ale was put together. And for me, it wasn't my baby. It was Brad, so it wasn't my place to say. But people would turn around and go, "Well, can I give you a recipe and just nod or wink or whatever?" And the most amazing thing was you just see the stupendous amounts of Galaxy that folks would put into the beers, hot side and dry hop, to try and replicate. And again, not realizing that it's a less is more thing, because these compounds are so, so full on and volatile, I suppose, that it's pretty easy to cross a threshold from, oh, that's good, that's better, that's fantastic, that's awesome. Oh, that's shit house. That's that's terrible. As you keep going up the grams per litre scale, and folks don't necessarily realize that with Galaxy. It's taken me years. It took me years. We've had a limited release we put out from time to time called Hazy DC, which is an all Aussie hopped hazy, obviously, and Angus Young hasn't sued us yet, so that's good. And again, it was one where it took me a long time to, I finally got that beer out, and I finally realized I think I can tame the beast, because Galaxy and some of her sisters are just like crazy fucking wild horses, and if you can get the saddle on them and just control them just enough, you'll get fantastic beer out of it, So stay away from hot side. Less is more. Yet again, use them early and fresh. Like if you're only going to make so many Galaxy beers, I'd do that fairly early on in the piece. I don't think aged Galaxy is great for anybody. So, but that's true of most hops. So.
That's awesome, Scotty. You probably just doubled the sales of Australian hops in America just by doing that. Nice work. Hey, look, we're probably rounding off to the end of this little chat, but let's finish off. What do you reckon are the biggest challenges facing the brewing industry in Australia? And I guess that probably flows out into the world as well. Why not? What do you reckon?
You know what? Like in Australia, there's so many there's a proliferation. Like I think I said when I started at the Sunny Coast, when I turned pro, there was like 135-ish breweries all up. I think there's like 900 now in the space of, what is it, 14, 15 years or something. Well, that's a lot. And I think when I was in the US, September, October, I think someone quoted me about 9,000 over there. Like it's insane. So obviously there's competition between breweries, for shelf space, for fridge space, for, attention. But as much as anything, I think the biggest threat, potentially, or challenge is from other beverages, people spending their money on other things, whether it's the seltzer thing didn't really sort of blow up too big over here, but whether it's those other sort of moderate alcohol sort of beverages that are really playing a part. The no alcohol thing sort of coming up a bit as well. There's that side of it. There's the usual things that everybody, wherever we are facing around sort of global, supply chain issues and stuff. And I think, in a lot of ways, I worry sometimes that we as an industry, that we don't want to paint ourselves into a corner, because in the sort of growth and exploration of what beer can be, I think we've also managed to make it more gimmicky at times than it should be. And it's always good fun. I love poking fun at myself and even at the beers we make, but sometimes it's potentially to the detriment of beer, that where particularly breweries who might be vying for attention or have those insecurities around not being noticed, and they make the really sort of stunt beer sort of things aren't always that great. That's probably me just being jealous because I can't make them, but I'm a pretty simple guy. I'm still trying to get
obviously this is something that we've dealt with a lot, but it's there has to be a good reason to do something in a beer. I feel it has to make it genuinely better or more interesting, or I think there's a line, and you can tell when you've crossed it. You can tell when it's a stump beer. Somebody put deer sperm in a beer here. This was quite a few years ago at probably peak silliness, but
it wasn't you, was it?
Deer semen. No, it wasn't me. I would never put semen in a beer. You know that.
Of course, mate. No, but so the thing is, you guys are innovators, so it's genuinely searching for, and that's for the folks out there that don't know Pete. He's probably one of the best in the world at making adjunct beers. Like, Pete's the guy. If anyone can get something in a beer that you wouldn't have thought of, it's probably Pete. I guess what I'm saying,
with the exception of deer semen,
apart from sort of animal, genomics or whatever. But I guess the thing is, when you've got like new breweries that start off making like really esoteric beers right off the bat because 6 of their mates thought it was a good idea, I think a lot of that sort of stuff can be problematic, and you can get a lot of new entrants into the beer game who actually haven't got the basics down, haven't got the discipline about how to make a solid lager or pilsner or IPA or a good pale ale that your customers can come and drink and rely upon you for any day of the week, because that's kind of our job at the end of the day in a lot of ways. And I don't think it's a boring or a less than honorable thing to do, because people end up relying on us. We have to, and you're the same. Like, it's not my beer anymore, it's their beer, and we've got to show up every day and make their beer properly, and I wonder sometimes that people just sort of ride in on those coattails and just go, well, we're going to be the brewery that does, like pastry stouts with, animal fluids in them and all sorts of stuff like that. And is that a great place to start to build your audience? And also that, beer is facing a lot of headwinds, not just from the complexities of making beer, but from the competition for attention, from other beverages. So, we kind of need to, I want us all to be great, or as good as we can be. And that's not always the case if if you're making beer because you think it's just going to get you attention, rather than, as you said, you've got to have a bloody good reason to make a beer in the first place. And then it doesn't matter what goes in it if it's done really well. But if it's done just to the hey, look at me stuff, like that works sometimes in festivals here and there, as because we've got beer festivals set up to do some of that sort of stuff. But I also think we just got to make sure that as this industry matures, that all the new folks coming in, boys and girls that are making beer, young men and women, I should say, that are making beer, that have solid foundations, because beer is a lot older than any of us and our businesses, and there's a stewardship piece. We need to take that responsibility and make sure that beer's around, and good beer's around long after we're not. So.
That is a beautiful place to wrap this interview up, Scotty. That was possibly the most profound thing I've ever heard you say. And there you go. So look, man, huge thanks, Scotty, for being so generous with your information and chatting. I will always remember now your soft hands. Who can forget Scotty and his soft hands? So look, that's it for this episode. Scotty will be back on the next episode of this show as a host, having a conversation with a brewer of his choosing, and that'll be on air in 2 weeks. So make sure that you tune into that. Make sure you visit allaboutbeer.com, follow on social media, and remember to support journalism in the beer space. Check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer and buy them a pint. Why not? Thank you. I'm Pete Gillespie from Garage Project in New Zealand. It's been a pleasure. Goodbye, Scotty. Goodbye, everyone. I love you.
See you, folks. Love you, Pete.
See you. Bye.
This episode was brought to you by First Tea. First Tea delivers the ingredients and experience brewers need for delicious beers and innovative flavors. Flexible order sizes and direct from farm teas for your next brew. Find out more about First Tea by visiting blog.firsttea.com. That's blog.firsttea.com.